Hey everybody, thanks so much for joining. We're going to be going inside, so we're masked up for now, and I don't need to tell you where we are. Look, this is where we are. It's a new facility with a new superintendent, and he happens to be a good friend of ours. That's Ernie Price. You might know him from Appomattox, where he spent, I think, a millennia actually working, something close to that. So Ernie, we're about to go into the visitor center. It's closed at the moment, so we can give you a little glimpse. That shouldn't stop you from wanting to come here and check out this whole camp, as well as the visitor center. Ernie?
Great, thanks, Gary. Yes, so we're all going to step inside, and the cool thing is that's not something you can really do right now, in the throes of COVID. But we're hoping, like a lot of people, that the light's at the end of the tunnel and you will be able to come in. So this visitor center is right off the main parking lot. It's the first thing you see after you get parked. And when you come in, you've got the little visitor center area, and we're also going to explore the museum. So let's head inside. Once things are back up and open inside, this is where you would be greeted. Pardon our mess, we're not open right now, but this is kind of the orientation. We have a small room where we can show a video just to help you get a grasp of Camp Nelson. We understand that not everybody's heard a lot about Camp Nelson. It's not on your big battlefield list, and so it's a good way to get oriented to the basics of what Camp Nelson is. An even better way too after that is actually heading into the museum itself.
Before we walk around, Ernie, what are people going to expect to see here? How's this facility set up?
Right. So Camp Nelson was a lot of things at once, but it was not a battlefield, but it was almost everything else. And so in the museum, you'll get an idea of the major functions that Camp Nelson was. It was built to be a supply depot, and it was certainly that. But it also, because of the number of people that were here, it needed to have its own hospital. It even had its own prison. It was a massive station for rehabilitating horses and mules to do work here in the camp, but also to send out onto campaigns and into battles. It became a recruiting station for 8 United States Colored Troop regiments, even some white soldiers. So it's a lot of things. And so what the museum does is give you a chance to touch on those major functions before you head out on the trail and actually see where these things existed. One of the really important places, I think, to stop by is this topographical map. And it explains, you see the Kentucky River over here on the left side, which would be the west side, and Hickman Creek on the east. But the camp is built in between these two bodies of water, which are guarding it with massive palisades, east, west, and even to the south. And so we're up on the northern part of the camp. The camp, and back in the 1860s, was about 4,000 acres. But here today in the monument, we've got between 400 and 500 acres that you can explore. But it's an awesome site. It's a lot to take in, but the museum's a good place.
And what I like is there's something for everyone. So, I mean, right away, so they get into why the camp is established. It's a big supply depot, of course, and when you have a supply depot, a lot is going to go on. And the camp would later become something else, sort of, that was unintended. But for now, what are you expecting to see? Uniforms, right, armaments, everything that a supply depot would need.
Now, we've taken liberties with this exhibit. What we're trying to talk about here is that it was a quartermaster, but it was also a commissary. We kind of hodgepodged it all into one exhibit just to give folks who don't normally study the Civil War a chance to see, what do you mean supply depot? What kind of supplies? And this is just the tip of the iceberg. Uniform items, ammunition, food, camp supplies. And as you would imagine, the site is largely archaeological. The camp was dismantled in 1866. And so a lot of the evidence of the camp has been found through archaeological work.
And I think it's just great. I don't want to mess up the name of who the predecessor to the National Park Service was, but they've done a great job administering the site for so long.
Yeah, Jessamine County made this a county park in the late 1990s, put all the land together, and actually built this visitor center and museum. Actually, all the infrastructure you see here today was built by the county, and it's just absolutely impressive. And it's an honor for the Park Service to come in here now to carry on that legacy. And where we can, we'll expand and do even more, but we're thoroughly impressed with our partners. You see a wagon here because wagons and horses and moving supplies, and it's just such a huge part of the operation here. So you'll see that theme throughout.
And the way to my heart is that there are pictures of some of the wagons and ambulances that were here at Camp Nelson. There are more than 40 pictures taken here, which might not sound like a lot. I've taken more than 40 today with my camera. In the Civil War, most sites would kill to have 40 photos of that place. Some battlefields have no photos until 10, 20, 30, 40 years after the Civil War. So this is great.
Right. So one of the major themes that we talk about, and again, this is what the county put together, and they want to talk about the fact that when you have this many people in one place for a long time, you need a hospital. It also meant that Camp Nelson was also tragic. There's a lot of death associated with the camp, as you would find at really any Civil War site. But this is a big part of it: development of hospitals, ventilation, understanding diseases, sanitary, just like in any other Civil War site. But here it's concentrated because they were here from 1863 to 1866, not just a battle or campaign, but long term.
So after this depot is established, all of a sudden, enslaved people in the region, started making their way to this supply depot, changing the complexion of what it actually was. And all of a sudden, you have all these United States colored troops being recruited and trained here. You also have their families with them, also trying to gain freedom. So it's an inspirational story. There's also some tragedy in there too.
Yeah, and so this will list all of the units that actually served at Camp Nelson. But again, 8 of the USCT units, for example, like the 114th and the 116th, these were units that actually formed at Camp Nelson, but there are lots of regiments that will come through Camp Nelson on their way to places like Knoxville, the Atlanta campaign, the Saltville battles in Southwest Virginia. But Camp Nelson, it's a National Park Service site now that obviously will interpret the story of Camp Nelson, but I think there's also a responsibility here to interpret these camps all over the South and Upper South. There's literally hundreds of these camps. Most of them are long gone now. So we have a chance here to not only talk about Camp Nelson, but what it meant to be a camp, a recruiting station in the South during the war. Remember, these are federal holdings in slaveholding country, and there's an incredible dynamic when that happens. So here's one of the scenes that focuses on the men in the camp. And so these, especially the men of fighting age, of course, they will become, many of them will become United States colored troops. And should point out, of those 8 units that are here, you've got infantry, you've got cavalry, and you've got artillery. So quite a cross section.
It's the trifecta.
Yeah, it is. And these are some of the stories that the former archaeologist here at the county park extracted through his research. And it really puts not only names, but as you can see, even faces. Back to the photographs again.
And that's pretty rare.
Yes, and stories of what happened to these men while they were here. And again, some of these stories they don't all have happy endings, but they're all part of the evolution of a changing nation and unfolding right here. So, a big story at Camp Nelson is how people lived. As I said, 1863 to 1866. So you've got a lot of people that are going to live in rows of tents, but you've also got huge barrack buildings that are built. But what they also found was that individual cabins, a lot of them were, say, 16 by 16 foot cabins, became kind of the norm, and in many ways preferred. They were healthier than large barracks. So you have all examples here at Camp Nelson. Again, they're literally understanding this as it's happening. So, in addition, again, maybe unlike a traditional battlefield, not only do you have the story of the men that were here, you've also got the story of women. And here you see the stories, again, some of them are tragic. Children that are being put into harmful situations, exposed, cold winters here in central Kentucky. But there's also uplifting stories too. This is the first time that any of these folks that come into the camp would have a chance to receive any kind of formal education. Although this education might stop and go in spurts, it's going to be part of the legacy of Camp Nelson. And people that understanding that the emancipation story is critical, but without education, it would be limited. And so that is another part of the success story here at Camp Nelson is the education of formerly enslaved people, including women and children, not just the soldiers. Over here, this part of the exhibit actually focuses more on the legacy of Camp Nelson. And some of these folks are actually the children of the United States colored troops that served here. you know, there's a part of the park over here that isn't really in the heart of the military camp, but it was the area known as the home for colored refugees. Later, this community across Highway 27 would be known as the Hall. And this talks about that community and the next generation, if you will, the benefactors of that emancipation and to that some degree of education. Some of these descendants would go on and attend Fisk University and other places. Music would be a big part. The Booker family is quite famous here in the Hall community. Literally recorded a record well after the war, of course, with their big hit, Camp Nelson Blues.
Yeah. Well, Ernie, this is really cool stuff. I want to not only thank you for taking us through the museum here and wish you luck in all that you have to do here. I want to encourage you all, three things, if I can remember three things. One, we have an itinerary on our website that helps you tour Civil War Kentucky in 1 day or 3 days. Camp Nelson is included, of course, in those itineraries. Two, if you see my mask and want to see what it says, the world turned upside down, relevant to Yorktown, relevant to Hamilton, relevant to all sorts of things. And our good friend and designer of Hallowed Ground magazine, Jeff Griffith, made that. And third, go to our website. We have a massive collection of USCT, United States Colored Troops, as well as African-American related content at battlefields.org. Thanks to Chris White for filming and doing all the yeoman's work behind the camera. Thanks again to Ernie, and thanks again for supporting Battlefield Preservation.